Oh my goodness.
See?
And now you're coming for attention. And you're
You okay?
I'm good. I'm good.
Well, usually I would ask you how your weekend was, but I kind of know because I was there
You
yesterday.
spent it with me.
I did. I finished the book today.
Yeah.
I was very underwhelmed.
Yeah. Hey, witches.
Hey, witches. Oh, that reminds me. So I listened to a podcast called Coffee and Cauldrons.
That sounds cute.
Yes, it's a podcast about witchcraft and it has Robin Valentine and I'm so sorry I can't remember the other host names. I noticed today when I was listening to it that they also say bi witches.
I think it's fine.
I think it's fine too, but I also wanted to acknowledge that in case there's any people who also listen to Coffee and Cauldrons that like we did not intend to copy them. And in fact, I really love the podcast.
Good. I want to give a quick shout out to my friend Edith, who decided to start listening to our podcast today, because I told her about it today.
Oh, hi Edith.
Edith, thanks
Hi.
for listening.
I'm gonna start drinking water instead of this milkshake, so I'm not all phlegmy.
Oh, I'm flummy too. I just ate a shit ton of chicken stuff. Oh my God, Tony made this amazing casserole, and it's like a chicken stuffing casserole. So it's got like Thanksgiving stuffing, and it's to die for, especially when you add like herbs and spices, like to die for.
I'm
Um,
so happy for you.
I am recording out in the living room today because my desk is a mess. Um, so if you hear background noises, it is Ziggy Piggy. And if you watch on YouTube, you might very well see me throwing a ball for a dog.
Yeah, not to plug the Patreon too early, but if you are a $2 patron, you do get to see Ziggy in this episode. And he is pretty much one of the cutest dogs I've ever seen. So,
He is freaking adorable.
all right. So today we are talking about okay, before we start, I should preface so what was on my list was the Fear Street trilogy, like the movies. And Kaya's like, there's books. And I was like, oh, cool, sick. And so we wanted to read the books. I don't want to say we picked the wrong books because that's technically not true, but there are so many Fear Street books in the Fear Street series that even if we wanted to, I don't think we could do a full episode on all of the Fear Street books.
Okay, yeah, so let's rewind a year ago. Tony and his sister wanted to watch the Fear Street movies, and I was just like, it's scary. And I decided I wanted to read the books first. And so I did some heavy research to find out which books the movies were based off of. And it told me the Betrayal series. Now,
That's technically not untrue because one of them is on the list that I found.
the Betrayal series is a prequel series to the Fear Street
Series.
series.
It's technically called the Fear Street Saga, which is what we've been calling the Betrayal series to help keep from confusion because we're,
Confusion.
we're talking about the Fear Street Saga in the Fear Street series, and we're also going to be talking about the Fear Street Trilogy, which is the movies.
The Netflix movies.
That's a lot of Fear Street titles. So we're just calling it the Betrayal series for simplicity's sake.
Now, none of the characters, zero, none of the characters in the Betrayal series were in the Fear Street trilogy movies. It pissed me the fuck off. And I have more to go into for next week.
Yeah.
I have thoughts.
Yeah, we have more to talk about as far as like the movie adaptation goes, read the books. Um, I've had some time to think about it, but I will save that for next week. But for this week, we're talking about the Fear Street Saga, which, like I said, we've been we've been calling it the Betrayal series because there's just too much Fear Street going on. The Fear Street Saga, which we've been calling the Betrayal series, is part of R.L. Stine's Fear Street series. This saga helps explain the origin of evil in Fear Street. The entire time we were reading this, I was so confused why it was so drastically different from the movies, and now I know why. Like I said, there's just so many books in the Fear Street series that we just happen to pick books that don't align with the movies. There's more to that, and we'll get to that next week.
I also want to mention that Kyla saw the movies first and then read the books. I read the books first and then saw the movies. Wholly came in two completely separate introductions, experience, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I saw the movies when they came out, and I loved them. And so I was definitely expecting something different, and that definitely, I think, impacted my experience with the book. Here's a little spoiler-free review for anyone who wants to read the books.
Yeah, I think first I want to go into there's so much. There's so much. Both the books and the movies go over two families in specific, the Fear family and the Good family. They are so vastly different.
It's going to be difficult for us to, I think, focus on just the books, seeing as me and Kaija just had our little movie night yesterday.
I think I'll do okay. I think I know I wanted to touch on parallels between both of them and the Salem witch trials.
I know in the first book, in the Betrayal, they do briefly mention that in the town over in Salem, that there's the witch trials going on. And then there's witch trials going on in Wickham, which is where the betrayal takes place.
I have words for when we go over it.
Okay.
Brief spoiler-free review. I first and foremost want to mention R.L. Stine has done a lot for young people. R.L. Stine introduced a lot of teenagers and kids to the horror thriller genre. He got a lot of people interested in reading at young ages, especially guys and boys. And he has done a lot for our generation. Okay. With that being said, I would put this series and the targeted audience as high school and middle school, probably teenage years. The writing, it's got a good storyline, but the writing was not as deep as I had hoped it would be, and the storyline changed quite abruptly. And I probably would have really, really enjoyed these books had the storyline not changed so abruptly. And the writing was a little bit more deep. And I was really sad because they didn't meet the hype that I had in my mind. Because I was really excited. I was like, wow, these books are going to be so great. This is going to be an awesome series. It's going to be so good. And it was mediocre for me.
Yeah, like I said, I think we went into this with certain expectations. And usually when I go into a book, I don't have any expectations. And I definitely went into this with the wrong expectations because as a fan of the movies, I was expecting different stuff. And I think that's a fault on my part. We didn't know which books were with the movies, and that's not the book's fault. But what is the book's fault is, like Kaija said, the writing is just a little too plain and repetitive, and I think that's because of the target audience. But at the same time, I read YA novels that have higher
reading level,
and more descriptive writing styles, because this guy uses the phrase, "This got on my nerves." He used the phrase "pale creamy white skin" not one, not two, but 5 times in these 3 books. And like this is a really quick read. So when you're reading this, like this is a really fast read. So it feels like a lot to read that same phrase over and over and over again. I really enjoyed reading the first book, which is The Betrayal. But The Secret and the Burning, by then it just got repetitive and like I don't know, by the third book it felt like a chore to pick it up. If you saw the movies and you liked Fear Street Part 3 1666 and would like more content like that, I'd recommend picking up The Betrayal, but only that one because the other two books aren't like gripping or substantial enough to justify reading them, to be honest.
Borrow them from a library, do not purchase.
Yes.
I also want to say I did not like how the books were divided up because you would be in multiple different years in the same book. And I feel like that could have he could have condensed them all into one single book or into multiple, even shorter books.
I'm wondering if he released them not at the same time. But on the other hand, when an author has a series like this, they usually have everything planned out. So if that's the case, then yeah, why wouldn't you just release it all in one book? But on the other hand, I remember the Goosebumps books being really thin. And so maybe that was part of why he released them separately, is so that they could like be short reads for his target audience.
With that being said, I think we can step into the books.
Yeah. So The Betrayal, which I think is the best one out of the three.
I would agree. It's probably the best written as well.
Yes. Takes place in 1692.
Part of it does.
Part of it does.
Yeah, it goes back and forth between 1900 and then the years in which the story progresses. So
Right.
it jumps from 1900, Nora is the narrator, and then she starts telling the story of these two families. So it starts off in 1692, and then we flash forward like 15, 20 years, and then the next book comes and you flash forward like 20 years later, and then 100 years later, but it doesn't go, once it goes back in time, aside or forward in time, you don't go back. The only place you will be going back to is 1900 at the beginning and the end of each book, when Nora is telling the story.
Right. Yeah, she kind of bookends. I get it because it's a book. She bookends the stories. So Nora will start the story. She'll be like, "Oh, I'm in a space and I'm writing the story and then at the end of the book she'll be like, "Oh man, that was really tiring writing that story. I got to keep writing." Like that's basically how they start and end each of these books.
I want to point out that I imagine her writing in an outhouse.
Okay, yeah. I was not sure what
You weren't going to say it, but you thought it too.
I thought she was writing in a shed until I finished reading today. She was not writing in a shed. But we'll get to that.
I missed a lot, yes, or forgot a lot.
Well, you have read 2 books since you finished the book, so I don't blame you for forgetting. I would have also forgot.
It's like 4 now, but
all right. So we have a family of 5: a husband and a wife, William and Martha Good, their daughter Susanna, and a baby boy George. They live in the town of Wickham, Massachusetts, which is near Salem. And the girls in town have been arrested and burned at the stake for witchcraft lately, condemned by the magistrate Benjamin Fear. And the Fear family is very wealthy, and the town operates pretty much under the prosperity gospel, which is that if you're pious and righteous, you will have worldly riches. That's basically what the prosperity gospel is.
So Susanna, the daughter, is in love with and has been meeting Benjamin Fear's son, Edward. They want to get married, and after she returns from a walk, her father, William, tells her she needs to sit down for a talk and mentions that she's been seen walking with Edward in the woods unchaperoned. And Susanna tells all, and says that she's in love with Edward and they plan to get married. And William tells her that Edward is engaged to someone in another town, and she's absolutely heartbroken. At that same time, across town, Edward is fighting his father on the basis that he absolutely will be marrying Susanna and not this girl from a rich family in some other town. And Benjamin is like, he's not having it, he's not having it, he's not having it. And then all of a sudden he's like, fine, okay, you want to marry her? All right, let me just look in this sleeve and tell me, oh, I got something planned up there.
Benjamin's a little bitch. Anyways, he
Seriously,
shows
fuck that dude. He's like modern day Donald Trump. Excuse me, 1692 Donald Trump.
yeah, 1692 Donald Trump. He is just, oh, God, and he's not as bad in the next book, but he still is annoying as fuck. So he shows up with guards at the Fear house the next morning while William, the dad, is out, and he pretends to find a spell sachet in the hearth. And it has a chicken foot, animal bones, and a vial of blood. And Susanna and her mom are arrested for witchcraft. And in my head, I was like, well, what the fuck? Why are you dragging her mom into this? So they have to leave the baby George with the neighbor, which made me sad. And they're both found guilty for witchcraft really quickly. Edward comes to visit Susanna while she's in jail, and he's like, how could you betray me? And Susanna's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Edward's convinced that his father would never do something to hurt him, like put the girl he loves on trial if she was innocent. But, like, have you considered your dad is just a bitch? I don't know.
So Matthew Fear is Benjamin's brother. They run the town. He goes to visit William Good, who's the father. I feel like I need to specify who everybody is because I keep forgetting. He meets him in the night and he tells him he can free his wife and daughter in exchange for money. And he wants specifically £100, but he gives him every single shilling that he has with the promise that they will be in his arms the following night. He also gives him a pot or some kind of cooking utensil thing. This part was very disappointing.
Yeah. The next day, William finds not Benjamin Fear, the magistrate, but Giles Roberts as Benjamin's replacement at the scheduled execution. Excuse me. The Fears robbed the storehouse and technically William as well, and took off before dawn. And the sentence of burning his wife and daughter will be carried out. And we kind of shit a lot on this book, but I did tear up a little bit here, and I'm a very sensitive person, so like take it with a grain of salt. But this stuff happened to real people, so like reading about that scene made me feel very devastated for him.
After William gets fucked over by the Fears, he gets filled with rage and hate. And shocker, Susanna and Martha were not the ones that were practicing witchcraft. William was practicing witchcraft, which I was floored by. I'll be honest, that was a very good plot twist. And he goes to this little secret room in the house and he places a curse on the Fears, swearing that they won't know peace until he has revenge. Oh, that's a parallel with the movies.
The book they took the most inspiration from on the list of books, at least that I know of, when I read the little blurbs about them, was The Betrayal. So after he casts that curse, we pick up 18 years later in Pennsylvania, and William Good has tracked down the Fear family, and they have grown prosperous again after fleeing Wickham. Jeremy Thorne, a boy from a house nearby, becomes the Fear's farmhand, and one of the Fears, Mary, which is Edward's cousin, has fallen in love with him.
As Mary and Jeremy's relationship blossom, the members of the Fear family are one by one dying. Edward's wife hangs. His father, asshole, I don't remember his
Benjamin.
name. Benjamin, thank you. Somehow loses all of his feeling in his limbs and is then found up propped up like a scarecrow in a field, which honestly fucked me up a little. Jeremy, the farmhand, then tells Mary he knows who killed them, and he says it was his father, William. They decide to get married to end the family feud. So he states that if somebody from the Fear family and somebody from the Good family marry, that the curse will end. Upon entering the Fear home, Matthew Fear holds up the family amulet to him and chants some words in, I believe, Latin, exposing that Jeremy was William all along. And he chants some more, and William disintegrates.
This made Mary snap. She went a little crazy. Edward takes Mary and his son Ezra, who's just a little boy, like 6, into the woods, and they start their lives away from the craziness of it all. Another 15 years pass, and Ezra is all grown up. He's about 18, I think, at this point. And both Edward and Mary are dead now. Edward had died of exposure, and Mary, because she went crazy, she kind of needed to be watched, and they left her alone for too long, and she had drowned in a shallow river. Although Ezra doesn't really know what happened all those years ago with the goods, he knows that they're responsible and he wants revenge. When Ezra is grown up and Edward and Mary have passed, Ezra makes his way back to the Fear estate farm. It's a farm. He finds the amulet in a room that had been bricked up, and he finds 2 skeletons in the room that had been bricked up, and that ends up being his uncle Matthew and his wife, whose name I can't recall. But they, like, his uncle had gone crazy and he bricked them up in there, and it's because of the curse, basically. So yeah, that's what happened with Ezra finding his family locked up in that room, and that's how he got the amulet. He was like, my only inheritance.
We are brought to the secret. The year is 1737. So 12 more years pass. Ezra now has a wife and 3 kids. She's very submissive. She just kind of lets him go on his rants and rages and his crazy ass obsession. And he has been searching for the goods all this time, these past 12 years, since he found his aunt and uncle or whatever in that locked away room. And he takes them all back to Wickham because he thinks he's going to find George Good there. However, a plague has wiped everybody out, and nearby farmers blame George Good for bringing a curse upon Wickham. The first thing that they see is like this horse and carriage, and his wife is like, hey honey, this seems a little off. And he's like, no, it's fine, and they keep going, and they see the horses laying on the ground, and she's like, honey, I don't think it's fine. And he's like, no, it's fine. And then he sends his kids off to go to a nearby inn where people are, you guessed it, dead. And then he sends another kid off to go find the magistrate, or I think, and she goes to find the magistrate, and guess what? He's dead in his office, and she sees a dead body, and she's like 9 or 8. And they're just like, everybody's dead. I don't think this is a good place. And he's like, it's fine. So they go to the Goods house and they live there because the Goods have fled to flee a plague, obviously, because that's what you do. You flee plagues.
Ezra is, I mean, Benjamin is the most like purely evil. Like, he is literally the reason the curse exists. But Ezra is like unhinged.
I would happily agree with that.
Jonathan and Abigail, who are Ezra's kids, keep going to town, like downtown Wickham, to play. And Jonathan doesn't really want to go, but his little sister Abigail is like, well, you have to come with me if I go because you have to watch me. And
Oh
he's
my
like,
God. And she keeps finding these dead animals and she keeps burying them.
she wants to give them a proper burial, which is like, it's sweet at first, but if I was her older brother, I'd get real tired of that real quick.
It's honestly kind of creepy. Like when I was that age, I was not touching dead things.
I think she probably made Jonathan bury them. She probably saw them and she probably made him bury them.
At age 20, whatever, when my hamster died, as soon as it died, I would not touch it with my bare hands and instead picked it up with a tissue because I didn't want to feel its rigor mortis body.
I mean, well, when you put it like that, shit.
Am I wrong?
No, I mean when you put it like that. In Wickham, Jonathan and Abigail, mostly Abigail, befriend a very obvious ghost. Her name is Hester. And later on, Hester asks Ezra if Abby can come over to play, and Ezra says yes. Even though Jonathan's like, don't let her go. Like, don't let her go, because he knows Hester is up to some shit. But Ezra can't say no to Abby because it's a little girl or whatever.
It's his baby.
Yeah, because yeah. And it's past supper and she hasn't come home. And when he goes to find her, he ends up in a graveyard and he sees Hester Good's gravestone. She's a good. And next to her, a freshly dug grave with a headstone carved with the name Abigail Fear. So his daughter has died in some supernatural way because a ghost of good has lured her to a graveyard, which honestly just fuels his whole unhinged vendetta.
Yeah, Ezra, yeah, he flipped his lid when he saw that Abigail had died. It was actually kind of, he said it was murder, but was it? Maybe she just fell into a grave? Just saying.
I
Um,
mean, she was lured out there by a ghost.
okay, but like a baby ghost. A few years later, the family has moved a few times. They are still searching for the goods. They've made some good money. Ezra's 18 now, and he gets a pretty neighbor, Delilah, which honestly, if you ask me, that doesn't sound like a very 1700s name, but who am I to judge? Um, she comes and she welcomes them to the neighborhood with an apple pie, and Ezra falls in love with her. Jonathan? Ezra.
Jonathan, sorry. I wrote Ezra.
You did.
That would be pretty
Uh,
gross if Ezra or
you know what?
yeah.
Meanwhile, weird things, are happening on the Fear property. They think that Abigail is haunting them, especially their mother, Jane. And one day, their well water bucket is filled with blood. Oh,
It's especially weird because there's no blood in the well. It's just in their bucket.
like a prank gone wrong.
Yeah. One night a scream wakes everyone up, but Jane, the mom, is nowhere to be found. And then she is found eventually dead in the well. With this, Jonathan somehow comes to the conclusion that Delilah is a good. Like it's written like he's like piecing the puzzle together, and I'm like, there have been no hints that Delilah is a good, but okay, Sherlock. So he runs to her and he asks her to confess that she's a good, so she does. And they decide to get married and break the curse because I guess that's how you break the curse. And they almost do get married. But then Ezra bursts in with a shotgun and he's like, nope. Jonathan tries to wrestle the gun away and accidentally shoots Delilah dead.
And then Delilah's father pleads for his life, saying he's not a good and that Delilah had lied because they're very poor, and seeing the Fears are wealthy, he wanted to trick Jonathan into marrying her. And the hauntings at the Fear property were Delilah all along, and she's the reason that Jane fell into the well and died. Now, right here, I want to touch on something real quick. Um, Delilah's father's full of shit because he wouldn't know that the only way, or neither would she, that the only way to break this curse is to marry a good with a fear. Either that or he made it up. And we'll get into the more of that later because I got words about it.
Yeah, the whole thing with Delilah and her dad was annoying. At this news that they're not really goods, Ezra snaps. He runs outside wailing, and he's immediately trampled by a horse. He gave Jonathan the family amulet while he's dying, and he tells Jonathan to avenge him, and Jonathan's like, nah, this is crazy. He locks the amulet in a box along with his dad's ashes, and he buries it. And there it stays for 100 years.
We flash forward to the 1840s and we see Elizabeth Fear. She is in the backyard and she finds the amulet. They don't know about the curse. They don't know about the beef because Jonathan did a pretty damn good job of making sure that didn't, keep going. And a man named Frank Good comes to the Fear family's door in search of food, and they give him a hot meal, they give him a bath, they give him clothing, and he becomes a fixture in the Fear house. And both of the daughters, Elizabeth and Kate, fall in love with him. And they also have a brother named Simon, and I think there's another brother as well. And he plans to go grow close to all of the family members and pick them off one by one. Now, Jonathan made sure that his family was not aware of the Fear Good hullabaloo. Frank and the Good family obviously did not do the same thing, so there's obviously still beef on the Good side of the affair.
Yeah, so Frank is being two-faced. And because he's playing both sides with Elizabeth and Kate, like romancing them, Kate announces that she and Frank are marrying. This whole time when we're reading the book, we're only getting Elizabeth's point of view. We're only knowing that Elizabeth is, romantically involved with Frank, but it turns out he's romantically involved with Kate as well. So at this news that Kate is marrying Frank, Elizabeth is dumbstruck. And not long after, like super quickly after, actually, Kate is found dead in the woods with a knitting needle in her heart. It was Frank, but everyone thinks it was Elizabeth because they think she killed her out of like a jealous rage.
So Simon ends up going on a walk in the woods to clear his head, and he's confronted by an old woman that they were all afraid of as kids. I'm pretty sure they all thought she was a witch, and her name is Old Aggie. And she knows all about the fears, all about the goods. She knows about the feud, the curse, all of it. And she said to him, "Your name can be rearranged to spell fire, and that is how your family will meet its end, in fire, because their name is spelled F-I-E-R, not F-E-A-R." And she's basically telling him that their family is fucked. The end of their line is going to end with fire. And then she gives him a poison dagger, and she tells Simon to defend his family with it, which I've never heard of a dagger defending a family against fire, but
That's a really good point. I did not even think about that. But she did know that Frank was there. She knew Frank Good was at their house. And she's like, y'all are idiots for letting him in your house. Upon return, Simon finds his parents dead in the kitchen and Simon with an axe standing over Elizabeth. And she's about to be next. Simon dodges an axe blow and scratches Frank's arm with the tip of the poison dagger. It takes a while to work. They don't think it works at first, but it does work. And Frank falls down dead.
Simon thinks that the feud is over, as Frank is dead, and to avoid the curse, to avoid ending in fire, he changes his last name from Fear F-I-E-R to Fear F-E-A-R, which honestly I think is worse.
Yeah, I don't know if he thought he was doing a big brain move there, but like a curse is a curse. I don't think the curse cares how you spell your name. Like,
Simon's a dumbass, and that's very clear in the next book.
I mean, that's true. I mean, I know Aggie was like, you can rearrange it to spell fire, and it's like, yeah, but there's also the fact that something that comes up a few times, actually consistently, is that the amulet, when people wear it, it feels warm, and it like they have visions of fire, and they can see Susanna Good, the first girl from the first book, burning at the stake. Like they have very brief visions of this happening. So I don't think the spelling of your name has anything to do with it, Aggie. Simon, I don't think it has anything to do with it.
No, curses are placed on the blood, not how you spell your name.
The next book is The Burning, and it starts in 1845 after we have our little 1900s chat with Nora. So Simon now lives in New Orleans, and he sneaks into a debutante ball on Mardi Gras. And here he sees Angelica Pierce, and he decides he must marry her, and he falls in love at first sight.
I just want to say, like, every part of this book I hated. On his way home from the party, he accidentally kills a man. Where was I when this happened? Kills a man who was trying to mug him using the power of the amulet. And knowing Angelica already has two suitors, he decides to use this power to his advantage. Wow. The first one, he forced to leap over the side of an opera box in a theater. And the second one somehow ended up in water while they were all standing on a pier, and he drowned and then got mangled by the rotors of a boat. Rotors? Motors?
Yeah, it's like one of those boats that has the wheels that look like a sunburst that are
Like
paddles.
it's a riverboat.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
Like in
He
The Princess and the Frog, the riverboat at the end.
Yeah, he gets stuck in the rotor, the paddle, that part of it, and it's very graphic, the part where they write about how he gets mangled. Um so if you don't have a strong stomach, would not super recommend.
While all of this bullshit is happening, Simon is getting closer to Angelica, and he he takes the time that he has after her suitors, her boyfriends, die to comfort her and woo her. And she finally accepts his affections. And when she says that she'll marry him, he confesses what he did. He confesses that he killed her previous love interests. And Angelica says that she's the one who killed them using witchcraft because apparently she's a witch. And then her father would never, ever, ever let him be with Simon. But because he's still an obstacle, they decide to use Simon's powers and kill him. And Angelica's like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's kill him. And then they drink blood together because they're turning into cannibals.
They're like, it's so edgy. Like the edge is so sharp. It's just that part made me just like, you know, because they're drinking out of wine glasses, and Simon's like, this isn't wine, is it? And Angelica's like, no, it's blood. And they're like, ah ha ha ha. And it's like, What? Who are you trying to impress? Like, shut up. Shut up.
Okay, so first off, the only thing that's acceptable to drink out of wine glasses that's not wine is chocolate milk.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Second off, the only thing you should be drinking wine out of that's not a wine glass is a mug. Sometime later, like 16 to 18 years later, Simon and Angelica have a family and they have two girls and three boys. And Hannah and Julia are the daughters. Julia's the oldest, and Hannah is the favorite. And Julia resents Hannah for this. They talk about like family parties and how Hannah needs to be like the host because Julia's a little bit of a homebody. And Julia's just like, um, she's full of a lot of rage. And they eventually, while all this drama's happening, get a new housemaid, and her name is Lucy. I'll bet you can guess her last name. It's good. The head maid, who stays in the story for the rest of the story, tells her not to go around saying that her last name is good because of the feud and the curse and all that shit. Julia thinks that Lucy's out to get them, because apparently Julia got glass in her shoe and she cut her foot pretty bad, and there was a snake in her bed. And
Hannah's the one who got the glass in her shoe and the snake in her bed.
yeah, and Hannah keeps suspecting it's Lucy when it was Julia who was Madame Bitch. And Julia poisons the meat pies that they make for a picnic, and nobody ate them except for the dog.
Yeah.
And Hannah goes fucking ape shit, running and telling the head maid lady that Lucy's poisoning them and is trying to kill them. And the maid lady is like, well, Lucy's gone. She left because she didn't like you guys and you were scaring her. And by the way, Julia was Madame Bitch, and she's the one who prepared the meat pies. So she killed your dog, actually.
I'm feeling like this is Kaya's least favorite book out of all of them.
It really is.
Basically, Julia wants Hannah dead.
Because Hannah is the favorite child, and Julia's like, well, I'm the oldest, so I should be the favorite.
Yeah.
And so Julia tries to kill her sister, Hannah, by strangulation. But if you've watched any true crime documentary or listened to the Morbid podcast at all, you know that it takes a lot to strangle somebody. And you don't just like, and they're dead. Like, you have to actually sit there choking them for like 6 or 7 minutes before they actually die. But Hannah recovers, and when Julia comes at her again, she hits her over the head with a fucking shovel, and she puts her body in a casket. Oh my God, this part was so gross. On a casket on top of another body of a man who recently died. She doesn't know, though, that she didn't actually kill Julia because she obviously didn't check for a pulse or to see if she was breathing. And Julia actually ended up being buried alive. And so Simon's like, where's Julia? Where's Julia? Where's my daughter, Julia? And he starts hearing this like noise, like I think it was described as a whistle, a howling.
Yeah.
Okay. He goes to follow this noise because he's like, oh, a howling noise. It must be my daughter. And he goes and follows to the source of the howling, and he discovers the grave, and he's like, Julia, is that you? And he digs up the grave and opens up the casket and sees that Julia was like scratching the casket with her bloody ass nails, and that Julia is now dead and she's sharing a fucking casket with old man Jenkins or whatever his name is. And
I think his name actually was Jenkins.
stop it. So Simon's like, who did this? And he finds out that Lucy, the maid, is of the good descendants, and he grabs one of his swords, which starts glowing, I think, and he goes into this fucking blind ass rage, and he searches for the killer, who he thinks is going to be Lucy, who I'm pretty sure does not know at this point that she quit and left. And he goes and he follows the sword as it's glowing through the air, and then he stabs someone. The sword brings him to the killer, who is indeed his daughter, Hannah, his favorite daughter. He kills his favorite daughter. Now they're both dead. Stop it! His name actually was Jenkins.
I
I'm
have the
stealing
book
that
next to
from
me.
SpongeBob.
I know. Yeah, so both his daughters are dead now.
So we fast forward to 1900. Um, Simon sent a letter to his grandson, whose name is Daniel, and he's like, "Hey, come to my birthday party." And so Daniel goes to the Fear Mansion to celebrate Simon's 75th birthday with him. And Simon's father, Joseph, doesn't talk much about his family because he got the fuck out of there. So Daniel doesn't know squat shit about nothing. And when he arrives at the mansion, the Uber driver was like, this place is bad. All of the townspeople are like, hey, you shouldn't go there. I mean, I know you're new in town, but don't go there. And Daniel's just like, did I make a mistake? And we're just like, yes, you made a mistake. And the mansion looks creepy as fuck. All of the occupants, so his grandfather Simon, his grandmother Angelica, and the maid, are looking old and creepy. And Angelica's lost her goddamn mind, quite literally, and she treats Daniel like a servant boy because she thinks he is one. Simon's going on about he like grabs him by the shoulders and shaking him, gives him a shaken baby syndrome, and is like, you need to continue the work that I left for you. Daniel's just like, bro, I'm here for your birthday, chill. And so Simon gives Daniel the family amulet, which by the way has some kind of like creepy ass saying on it, super creepy. And Simon gives it to him for Simon's birthday because he's crazy. Daniel puts it on and everything bursts into flames. Daniel realizes that the amulet has powers and he's like, this is a little much for me. And then he goes and visits the town, Shady Side, I think. Yeah, shady as fuck it is, yes. And he meets this woman, Nora Good, and they immediately fall in love. Boom, just like that. And Nora's father is just like, steer clear of that one. He's one of them fear mans. And Nora's just like, no, no, I trust him. He's good. He's good. And for the first time, somebody was right, but he locks her in a room and he plans to like skip town the next day or something, just like how the Fears did in that very first novel. And Daniel finds out that Nora is a good, and he figures out the history because he speaks to the housekeeper who's I don't know why she stayed, but she did, and that's her prerogative. The housekeeper says, and we're gonna get back into this, the only way to break the curse is through marriage. Okay, so I'm sitting here, was it fake or was it real? Obviously it's fake because it's a fiction book, but
No, it matters because if you're building a fictional world, you need to decide on the rules.
come on, RL. This is the third time this has come up. The second time it came up, the lady's dad, Delilah's dad, said
Oh,
that they're not actually goods, but he also said that he said to Nora, and Nora said to Jonathan that the only way to break the curse is through marriage. Okay, but if they're not actually goods, then that's fake as fuck.
So how did he
They
know?
right. So how would he know?
But I'm wondering, how does the housekeeper, the head housekeeper, know that that's how you break the curse? Why would she know that?
I don't know. Maybe she Googled it. Daniel goes to Nora and he finds her locked in the room and they escape through like a window and they elope like pronto. And he uses the Fear Family amulet in place of a ring. I'm pretty sure that everything in Nora's brain went to fire because that's just what happens. And Daniel takes Nora to his grandfather's birthday party, which has an attendance of 5, including Simon. And Angelica is like, it's that servant boy again, because she's lost her goddamn mind. And there's some super fucking weird shit going on when they go to tell them about the marriage and they go to tell them about, the family curse is broken, it's fine, everything's good, it's hunky dory. There's literally like the only people that are guests are Daniel and Nora, and then it's like literally Angelica, Simon, and housemaid. And so, like, what the fuck? And Simon and Angelica are seen smiling at and waving to invisible guests. Simon goes to blow out his birthday cake candles. Daniel decides to announce that he's married to Nora, and Simon freaks the fuck out and he knocks over the cake while he's trying to get out of his wheelchair, and the whole fucking place goes up in flames. Nora gets the fuck out. She sees every single fucking ghost from the past, both the fears and the goods, and no one fucking survives except for Nora. And she's been writing the history of the fears and the goods while this place is fucking going up in flames from, oh shit, an insane asylum?
Yeah, girl, it's not a shed.
I thought it was an outhouse.
No, no, after the place burned down, she told someone what she saw, like she saw the ghost, and then they were like, well, this bitch is crazy. So they took her to an insane asylum, and that's where she's been writing all night.
Okay, but I've seen Ghost Whisper and I know ghosts are real.
Then the nurses come to collect her for a doctor's visit. She hands them her stack of papers she's been tirelessly working on for the past 3 books, and they throw it in the fire because they're dicks. And they tell her they're going to build a road over where the Fear Mansion was. And they're like, do you know what it's going to be called? And she's like, what? She's like, over it. And they said it's going to be called Fear Street. And that's why it's called the Fear Street series. And then that's it. Then it's over. I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads.
I didn't give it any.
0.
I didn't read it. Okay, so thoughts. We already kind of went over this.
Yeah, the whole series, I gave it 2 stars. It's not a bad story.
No, it's not. I think had he gone more in depth with literally everything, except for the very beginning, where you get introduced to Susanna and Martha and William and George and Benjamin and Edward and Matthew and Giles. I think except for, everything except for that, like he needs to slow down and explain.
There's just a lot of people. There's a lot of names. There's a lot of family. And like something else that we could mention is that at the beginning of each book, there's they show like the Fear family tree. I feel like that's meant to be an aid of some sort, but it's not helpful. Like it didn't add to my reading experience. It didn't help me figure anything out. Like I wasn't confused by the relations, but like I feel like all the time jumps, and it's hard to express like a centuries long family feud without doing that kind of thing. I think it's just the writing style that really got me hung up, and you know what? I'm just not the target audience. It's not my reading
No,
level.
I'm not. No, I'm not. I it's a lot to put into 3 books, and they're 3 short books.
Yeah.
And I really truly believe that if he had not made them so short and put more like detail, like it would have definitely appealed more.
If there was more world building, I feel
Yeah.
like it would have been a lot more like immersive and enjoyable.
No, I agree with that.
Because he has these moments where like the writing is getting good, and then he also has moments where he makes some questionable choices with the way he writes. Speaking of ghosts, have you ever seen a ghost?
No, I haven't.
Me neither.
I'm afraid.
I'm not afraid, but if I did see a ghost, I'd be pretty freaked out.
So, parallels. Obviously, the name good is a parallel. Obviously, the witchcraft thing, parallel. You've got like people in positions of power who are basically orchestrating the whole fucking thing. And then you've got like the name Giles, which, okay, listen, you don't just name somebody in the book Giles without it being related to something else. And it was definitely related to Giles Corey.
I
Just saying.
mean, I'm sure that was a common name back then.
Yeah. And so was William and George and Martha and Edward and Benjamin and Matthew. But nobody names anybody Giles
They did back then.
except for Giles' mom. I think the parallels kind of stop after the very beginning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the rest of them aren't about the witch trials. It's really just
First one,
the
yeah.
first one. And I don't have anything to add as far as being a pagan witch, because this is one of those instances in which it is just too cartoony. It simply does not work that way.
So next week on the Movie Witch podcast, we'll be talking about the Fear Street Trilogy, a Netflix exclusive.
Which is infinitely better than the Betrayal series / the Fear Street Saga. Yeah, so Fear Street Trilogy next week. I'm excited because I love these movies, and reading the Fear Street Saga doesn't taint that for me, and finding out that they were not a direct correlation to like book to movie did upset me a little bit at first, but I'm kind of over it now. We'll talk more about that next week.
To support us, you should follow us on social media, which you can see on our link tree, which you can see on all of our social medias. Oh shit, you can't get to the link tree if you don't have our social medias.
Our Twitter is at MovieWitchPod, and our Instagram is at MovieWitchPodcast. Also, I started uploading our
YouTube now.
Yeah, we're on YouTube now because some people like our podcast on YouTube. I can respect that. And it doesn't take me much energy to just slap our podcast over our logo. So enjoy that. However, if you would like to watch the video version of the podcast with our
Which
faces,
you should, because my dog is featured. And you can see all of my sick ass outfits. Guess
what are you
what?
wearing?
A skeleton onesie. And you can't see it unless you subscribe to Patreon for $2 a month, which is less than what you would pay if you were adopting a dog virtually.
What? Adopting a dog virtually? Where?
Yeah, that's like $10 a month.
Like supporting them?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, that's a thing.
And then we also have a $7 tier where you get exclusive Patreon episodes.
Which is
Speaking
still less than what you would pay monthly if you were supporting / adopting a dog virtually.
True.
You could support / adopt me and Kyla virtually instead.
That would be great. I could use an adopting right about now.
Also, I'm our only Patreon.
But we're
Please.
not trying to pressure the people. They can do it if they want.
She's not. I am.
Speaking of Patreon exclusive episodes, our dear Kaija was sick last week, so we didn't have a chance to record. So you will get a taste of a Patreon exclusive episode
Without being Patreon exclusive.
Yeah, not next week because we're in the future, but
Last week.
last week, I think. Let us know what you think of that. And also, we're at the point now where I'm going to start asking for reviews. So review our podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. So review us. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we can improve on. and let us know what you want to see on the podcast.
Even though we have the entire first season picked out.
Yeah, but we're probably, I mean, who knows how long we'll be doing this podcast? Forever and ever and ever.
I don't think we'll ever run out of witching media.
That's true. There's always going to be some kind of supernatural shit out there. So, yeah, that's it for this week. We hope you keep listening, and we will see you next week.
See. Bye,
We will.
witches.
Bye, witches.